Everybody's favorite topic, money. Now, I know that the way the world is moving into a more digitalized online capacity, that the industry of technology, and especially what we're working in, web development, it's big, and it's only getting bigger, and the competition is only getting fiercer. So people are willing to pay very good money to have a smooth website in place to take that customer journey. So what can people realistically expect to get paid? Say, take me on the journey from like a trainee or a junior web developer through to fine, like a freelance. What's like the lower limits and the upper limits?
Yeah. So when you start out, the name of the game is always get experience, no matter what industry you're in. And sometimes that comes with sacrifice on money. But a junior web developer in a good market, in the UK at least, I mean, I would say the lower end would be 20 grand salary. That would be the lower end. You will get some guys hitting 30. Now, usually they will be particularly good. They'll have done something impressive to warrant that even before they got their job. Maybe they've built some very impressive university project. Maybe they've just done something that stood out, because 30 is quite high. Having
Yeah.
said that, there's going to be someone who pops up out of nowhere, and they went to MIT, and they went in and got nearly 100 grand off on day one. That's obviously not the norm. And they'll probably not also not be working on websites. They're probably going to be working on some kind of much more scientific, machine learning, robotics, so something that's much more almost a science than you're using programming as a toolbox.
Yeah.
But let's take the normal average Joe, 25K. It will be a decent but realistic starting salary. You will be a junior at that point, and probably so for 2 years. I think you should expect to be a junior for 2 years. Sometimes it'll take 3, sometimes you might escape it sooner. By the end of those 3 years, you should really be getting 30 grand. You might be getting 35 at a push. Now, the next step really is becoming a middleweight, or being classed as a middleweight developer. And that's quite a vague definition. Also, there's a lot of people who've got senior job titles but are really middleweights. There's a lot of people who have middleweight job titles but are really seniors. But the pay range, I would say, is sort of between the 30 to high 50s salary, again, in the UK. And if you keep going, and really, if you want to progress outside of just working as a web developer, you do need to hit that senior position at some point. It's very hard to go from not being a senior to get into freelancing, or from not being a senior to get into management. It can happen, you can do it, but really you want to hit senior in a job before you do so. So let's say at about the 5-year mark, if you're good, you will be at a point where you could become a senior. Sometimes it takes people 8-10 years. Depends on how suited you are to it, how much effort you make at it, and also maybe the type of environment you're working in. At that point, though, salaries in the UK really start at 70 grand. If you're not getting 70 grand, you're not a senior developer. It's as simple as that.
That's fucking good money.
It's not bad. It's not bad at all. And the thing is, it only goes up from there, because what you've got then is you'll be a senior developer, let's say, and at a certain point you'll get bored of being a developer, and you're going to go into one of a few avenues. You might become an architect, and what the architect is going to do is, much like an architect for a house, they don't build the actual house, but they plan the layout of it. Now, a senior architect easily making 100 grand. A person who doesn't maybe want to go into the architecture route, but is kind of enticed towards management, they'd probably go into a tech lead position, maybe a head of development, a head of tech. They'd be getting similar money to the architect, 80 to 100K. It's very feasible. To be honest, there's heads of development, heads of technology getting over 100K in the UK. The market is a little bit ridiculous at the moment, though, and I wouldn't say it's going to stay like this personally. I'd be surprised if it does, at least.
As in, what is there like a bubble? Is the
It's a bit
wages
of a
too?
bubble.
Okay, so
Yeah.
at some point it's going to pop and the wages are going to come down.
I think you have to look at, when you're considering how the money is good, you have to look, where does the money come from? The developers don't generate money in and of themselves. Typically, money that goes into the tech team is either reinvestment, so the company's made some profit, and instead of just paying out dividends to all the shareholders, they're putting a little bit of it back in to the business, and obviously what they put back in, they hope to make back in future returns. So if we hit a recession and profits are down, there's probably going to be a bit less money to go back into big projects like that. You've also got to look at the fact that throughout the COVID situation, you had massive accumulation of profits across various investment categories. And although a lot of people lost money on things like crypto, a lot of people made a lot of money. And that money has been used to reinvest either into existing companies or with new startups. So there's been a lot of capital knocking around that's helped push things forward. And the reason I don't want to sound doomsday about it, and I don't think it's a permanent thing. I think it will be good. I wouldn't say anyone should be worried, but I think the market is just particularly hot at the moment. And if we do have a big recession, if a load of companies stop making profits the way they were, I think tech will be the last section to go, but it will also not get the big, massive fun projects that kind of really spur on massive salaries, massive day rates. So I just, it's sort of a side point. I don't think it's something to be too worried about, but it is something there in the background. And then the other category of angle you go. So you go into architecture. After being a senior developer, you might decide you go into architecture, you go into management, or you want to go into contracting, freelancing. More commonly than not in tech, what is essentially freelancing is referred to as contracting. And there is work that you would call freelancing versus contracting. And it might actually be good to just define what the two are. So typically you would go contracting with quite a large organization. So let's say, I don't know, have you heard of Boohoo?
Yes.
Right. One of the biggest UK fast fashion companies.
Yeah.
So a big company like that, I don't know what money they make, but I imagine their turnover is well over 100 million a year, well over it. And I imagine they're operating on something like 20% margins in those regions. So you won't go freelancing for a company like Boohoo. You will be, if you want to go down the contract route, you will be brought on as a contractor on a 3, 6, maybe even 12-month contract. And that you will have your own private company, private limited registered company in the UK. They will hire that company and they pay your company a day rate for every day you turn up. You're not an employee in that scenario. You're very much self-employed, working for yourself, just on hire to these people. But that, I would say, is different to the typical freelance model where, let's say, you're a 1 to maybe 5 person e-com business with 1 to 5 products. And you just need a developer kind of 20 hours a month, something like that, just to touch up your front end, make things nice. I would think of that as more freelance than contract. And I would think of the Boohoo example as more contract than freelance.